That the Pakistan military received a big drubbing in Operation Sindoor is now well established. You would think that would lead to the weakening of the Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir. Instead, he has given himself a promotion, elevating himself to the rank of Field Marshal. Though disguised to be a decision by the Shehbaz Sharif government, well, we all know that no civilian government in Pakistan has any such authority. I'm Barkha, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we try and decode the elevation of Asim Munir to the rank of Field Marshal, only the second Field Marshal of Pakistan, the first after Ayub Khan. This is an extraordinary development given the drubbing that the Pakistan military has received in Operation Sindoor. Well established satellite images now show that Pakistani air bases were devastated, leading to a tipping point in the operation where the Pakistan Director General of Military Operations called his counterpart in India and asked for a halt to hostilities. Has Asim Munir been elevated or elevated himself to protect himself against rumblings in Pakistan? Remember, he was already an embattled and a besieged army chief, an unpopular army chief because of the unrest, the insurgency, the separatist movement in Balochistan, as well as the outrage or the outcry among Imran Khan supporters against the Pakistan military. Imran Khan continues to be in jail. What does the elevation of Asim Munir to the rank of Field Marshal mean for India at a time when India has made it clear that Operation Sindoor is not over? Remember, Asim Munir is a Pakistan army chief who has framed the conflict with India in theological terms. To that extent, he's a Zia redux and perhaps one who has been more vocally communal than even Zia-ul Haq in relation to India. To help us understand all that these developments mean and could mean, I'm joined now by one of the foremost voices on Pakistan. Tilak Deveshir is with us. Till recently, he was a member of the NSAB, but his books on Pakistan, on Balochistan, are a must-read for the times. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Let me actually start by picking up something you wrote on your own social media X feed. You said normally a field marshal is a rank that is given in the aftermath of a military victory. This is perhaps the first time in military history anywhere in the world that an army chief has been given the rank of field marshal after a defeat, after a military defeat, which of course is a defeat that the Pakistan military will not acknowledge. What do you make of this development? Why do you think it has happened?
Thank you, Barkha, for having me on your show. Always a pleasure talking to you. You know, I was surprised. I was, in fact, really amazed that as per military tradition, he should have, anybody become the field marshal only after great military victories. As Claude Auchinleck said, that he became a field marshal after military victories in the Second World War in Japan and Germany. And he was very upset that Ayub Khan had given himself the title of Field Marshal, and he asked him, what victories have you won? And in this case of Asim Munir, we know that he suffered a defeat. And yet the temerity to go and elevate himself to Field Marshal, I think the biggest factor here is they are trying to cover up the extent of the defeat. You see, everybody will expect if the promotion mili hai, to they must have done something really well in the engagement against India. But the fact that they haven't, how do they cover it up? There is evidence, there is satellite imagery of the air bases, 11 of them which have been totally demolished. The terror snake pits of Bahawalpur and in Muridke of the Jaish and the Lashkar respectively have been demolished. So how do you tell your own people who they say that we are the Marde Mujahid and that kind of a thing, and we are equal to India and we have our nuclear weapons, and yet they lose and lose badly. So I think this elevation is basically meant to mask all that. And the strange thing that this was largely an air battle. So if anybody had to be elevated, it should have been the Air Chief Marshal. He should have been appointed Marshal of the Air Force. What did this guy do anyway? What did the Pakistan Army do anyway? except for firing at civilians in Rajouri and Pune.
That's a really interesting point, that even if Pakistan wants to present the narrative that they did not lose this military confrontation, the kudos that Pakistan should be giving its own military is to the air chief of Pakistan and not to the army chief. So that is a really interesting point. Now, my question to you is this: you know, do we think, going by the history of Pakistan, that it's field marshal today and president tomorrow? We've seen that happening repeatedly in the past with Pakistan and its military chiefs. Do you believe that Asim Munir is basically placing himself now also be the person who overtly runs the government? Or is he smarter or more cunning, I should say, than Musharraf, and preferring to be a puppeteer in the shadows?
It could go either way. I think a lot is going to depend on what exactly are the implications of his becoming field marshal. I'm not very clear. You see, as per the constitution, as army chief, he can continue for another 2 years after November, as per the 26th Amendment. I don't see him foregoing the post of army chief. The only dictator who gave up the post to army chief was Ayub Khan, and he regretted it. After that, Zia had a vice chief, but he retained the post of the army chief, as did Musharraf till he was forced to take off his uniform. I don't see him taking off his army chief's hat. But if he does that, if he continues that within or more than 2 years, you can imagine the resentment in the army is going to be so much. Even if he creates another post of 4-star and makes him vice chief, yet chief is chief, So it is going to lead to resentment. You get one extension and then you continue for life, because field marshals don't retire, they continue for life. So is he going to do that? Or does he become, apart from field marshal, does he become commander-in-chief, as your visual is showing, in which case he also has then command over the Navy and the Air Force? Even if he becomes president, I don't see him giving control of the army. Because, the real power in Pakistan stems from the army chief. Not if you were a field marshal without being army chief. So there is a lot of uncertainty at the moment. It's too soon. It happened yesterday. I think in the coming weeks, there will be greater clarity, probably in his own mind too, and also in the minds of others, that what exactly is going to be the way ahead. What happens to the civilian government? Is he going to dispense with it? Will he keep it in the background? So lots of things are up in the air.
Now, before we actually look ahead, I want to look back. You mentioned, in fact, writing about this in one of your books on Pakistan. And if we go back to what happened with Ayub Khan, and if we can please show Ayub Khan's pictures, you talk about you describe how Ayub Khan took over the reins of power in Pakistan, and you talk about how Iskandar Mirza, whom he basically ousts while first pretending to sort of be on the same side as him, then he ousts him. And Mirza meets with Claude Auchinleck in London, where he's now living in exile, and he complains about how Ayub Khan dislodged him. So tell us that story before we actually look ahead. Let's look back at Ayub Khan.
No, Iskandar Mirza had a very unfortunate time. He is the guy who had saved Ayub Khan from getting court-martialed. This chap Ayub Khan had performed extremely badly in Myanmar. In fact, he was supposed to, the comment in the ACR was, cowardice under fire, which for an army officer is end of the road. Iskandar Mirza saved him because at that time he was defense secretary. He saved him again when Ayub Khan was in the Punjab Boundary Commission. He didn't perform well, but again Iskandar Mirza saved him. Iskandar Mirza then got him an extension. He should have retired in 1955 after his 4-year tenure as commander-in-chief. But Iskandar Mirza insisted to the then Prime Minister that if you don't give him an extension, I will quit. Got him 2 extensions. Made him defense minister. Even though he was a serving army chief, he was also defense minister in the cabinet. Despite that, when it came after Iskandar Mirza dispensed with the constitution and declared martial law, and in a couple of days or the next day, I think Ayub Khan went up to him and said, sorry, it's about time you left. And Iskandar Mirza was treated so shabbily. He was allowed time to pack 1 suitcase. Didn't have any money. Packed out of this flight. He had to pay for his ticket. Packed onto the flight. and sent off to London. And when he died subsequently, Ayub Khan was not there, Yahya Khan was there. Yahya Khan refused to allow him to be buried in Pakistan. So it was then the Shah of Iran who came forward and allowed Iskandar Mirza to be brought to Tehran and to be buried with full military honors in Tehran. So Iskandar Mirza had a very tough time thanks to Ayub Khan, despite having done so much for Ayub.
Yeah.
It tells you a story about Pakistan in itself.
Absolutely. And what does that whole Ayub Khan tenure tell you about how this might play out? It's not the same era, of course. It's a very different time. But how, if you were to look for hints in Pakistan's very repetitive history, sending civilian heads of government into exile is something that has happened repeatedly, sending them either into exile or into jail. This is actually the pattern of Pakistan's politics. The military, in some way or form, decides who's the head of the civilian government. What does the Ayub Khan Field Marshal experience tell you? The sort of movement to create Bangladesh starts in Ayub Khan's time, and eventually, India helps birth Bangladesh. What does that experience, looking at the Ayub Khan years, tell you about how Asim Munir as Field Marshal might look like?
You see, first of all, there'll be no loyalty. There'll be no loyalty to the civil government. There'll be no loyalty to the other officers who are around him. If he has to get rid of somebody, he'll get rid of him straight away. Likewise, if he has to push out Shehbaz Sharif into exile, or if he has to take even more strong measures against Imran Khan, he won't bat an eyelid doing so. But the danger for here, what I perceive, Balochistan is already in a very difficult position. With the BLA gaining strength, the civil society movement gaining strength, and the mainstream politicians, Baloch politicians, having been alienated. I see Asim Munir trying to prove that he is the guy who can fix this problem. He hasn't in the last 3 years, but try and take even more strong arm measures against the Baloch. So if you take a leaf from history, what Yahya Khan did in East Pakistan, you could see a repeat of that happening in Balochistan. Now, of course, Bhutto was pushing Yahya Khan in an election that had been held, and he didn't want Sheikh Mujib to become the Prime Minister, wanted to be Prime Minister himself. So, idhar hum, udhar tum, that kind of a thing, which Bhutto said. Today, you don't see that kind of a politician in Balochistan yet. Or somebody pushing or egging Asim Munir on. But I think Asim Munir has enough because of his background. See, Ayub was out and out half British anyway, Sandhurst and things like that. But Asim Munir is not that kettle of fish. He's more in the Zia mode. And because of that, he may try and push Balochistan in a far worse manner, and bring in a bit of religion, bring in a bit of, that kind of a thing. So I think it could mean dangerous times for Balochistan. It could be very dangerous time for Pakistan also. But I don't see any of the loyalty is going to be at a premium.
Can I ask you what happens, you think, to Imran Khan in this mix? During Operation Sindoor, there were rumors that perhaps Imran Khan would be released, that would be the pawn that the Pakistan army would play on the chessboard to try and rally everybody behind him, that it would be a good time to strike this deal. Now that he's become Field Marshal, he probably doesn't need to do that. So Imran Khan possibly continues to be in jail, or the thinking could be, you do a deal with Imran Khan, you weaken him, you emasculate him, have him out of jail. That's actually much more effective. It silences his supporters. How do you read the Imran Khan factor now that Asim Munir is Field Marshal?
It takes two to tango. If Imran Khan was to do a deal, he would have done it 2 years ago. He's sticking to his guns. He's not going to do a deal. He keeps coming up, or his supporters do, that he will talk to the government, he'll set up a committee, he'll talk to the army, he will only talk to the army. But none of that is going to happen. So long as Asim Munir is on board, Army Chief or Field Marshal or whatever, he is not going to do a deal with Imran Khan because he doesn't trust Imran Khan. And in Zia's time, when Zia had arrested Bhutto, a Pakistani politician told him, कि देखो भाई कबर एक है, लाशें दो हैं. There's one grave, and there are two bodies. Either you go in or Bhutto goes in.
Hmm.
Both of you can't survive outside. I think it's a similar situation today, that there is one grave, it's either Asim Munir or Imran Khan. And since Asim Munir calls the shots, he's not going to allow Imran Khan to come out and try against him. You see, because once people come out into the streets, especially in Punjab, even the Pakistan army will find it very difficult to find. It's the Punjabi army. They won't
Yeah.
fire at their own people in Lahore. If they come out in large numbers, and if Imran Khan tells them and he's out, so Asim Munir will not risk that. He will not risk having Imran Khan out. He would rather, I mean, even if I can say something really sharp, even we would rather that Imran Khan perishes in jail rather than to allow him to come out.
Well, one grave and two people, either Munir survives or Imran Khan does. Bhutto didn't survive.
Yeah.
Bhutto was sent to the gallows, right? You think Munir
You know,
now with this?
there was a
Yeah.
time when people said you do a deal with Bhutto. He was talking to Bhutto. That let Bhutto come out and conduct politics. And Zia was considering that till this politician told him this.
Hmm.
Then he realized it's not possible. You can't do a deal with Bhutto.
So, in that sense, if there's no deal with Imran Khan and we go by history, Zia sent Bhutto to the gallows. I mean, could that measure also be taken by somebody like Asim Munir, or would he feel the world is watching today? It's a much
No,
more interconnected world than it used to be in Zia's time.
yeah. But you know how the judiciary in Pakistan is. They frame a case of treason or of mutiny, inciting unrest against the army, people having died. And
Yeah.
Pak judiciary is not known to be sticking up. I mean, if you take the right from Chief Justice Munir, the doctrine of necessity, and all the judges who hanged Bhutto, they're pretty compliant. As far as the army is concerned, they will do their bidding.
So let's come to what this means for India and India's interests. Now, Asim Munir, it bears repetition that Asim Munir's communal speech preceded the Pahalgam terror attack. He has framed the clash with India in theological terms, right? I think that is the sense in which he's Zia-like. It's not that Musharraf didn't, Musharraf was the architect of Kargil. Musharraf and each one of them has nursed terror groups like the Lashkar and the Jaish. To that extent, they've all been the same. But Munir, after Zia, has perhaps been the most theological in terms of positioning the clash or the obsession that Pakistan has with India. How do you see that? The word jihadist general has been used for him. He's part tactics and part Islamist. So how do you see that? How do you see that vis-a-vis India?
You see, ideologically, Zia and he probably in the same mold. But Zia, I think, was far more nuanced and refined when it came to his public utterances. This man's public utterances, that speech we are both referring to at the Pakistan
Yeah.
Overseas Convention, was absolutely appalling for the head of the army. First of all, what was he doing in a forum like that and coming in his battle uniform? He was trying to prove a point, and then the obnoxious statements that he made reiterated, all the kind of ideological baggage that is within him. And he made no bones about it. And yes, that was a clear indication of which way this man thinks and what he is going to do. See, even Pulwama, when it happened, he was DGISI. And Pahalgam has happened when he's army chief. So this in itself tells you what he thinks of India, what he thinks needs to be done with India. Except that this time, he doesn't realize what a strong leadership is there in India and which will not allow this kind of a thing to go unpunished. So he may try, he will certainly would want to, given his ideological bent and his, the hatred that he has for India. I don't think so he will get away very successfully.
So my question to you is, given that we have said that Sindoor is a paused, this is not over, this is a pause. And I think everybody who watches Pakistan knows that while we have attempted to inflict cost on Pakistan for their proxy war, it is so deeply ingrained in the Pakistan deep state to do this that they will try this again. With Munir becoming Field Marshal, it seems almost certain to me that there is a more militarized, Islamized approach to India whether it's Shehbaz Sharif, who's prime minister, or someone else tomorrow, doesn't even matter. From an Indian security perspective, what should we be preparing ourselves for, given Munir's elevation?
I think, even without his being eliminated, if he continued to be army chief, I would have, I would sort of, that we need to be very careful. First, it is a wounded Pakistan. It is a wounded Pakistan army. They know that their doctrine of nuclear bluff has been called by India and has been called, terrifically. They realize that it's not going to work anymore. But how do they go back to the people? How do they justify to the people? Taking 30%, 40% of their resources of the country. And yet this is the performance. For all the much wanted Chinese equipment, technology, this, that, and all, it was all demolished by India. So I don't think that this cessation of hostilities, or even if it gets transformed into a ceasefire, will hold for very long. Pakistan will find some excuse or the other to, disrupt it. Terrorism, they will have to be thinking very harsh on, hard, because any terrorist activity now, on the lines of Pahalgam, will straight away be tracked back to them. And the world community is going to say that, they were not going to listen to any comments like false flag and this and that. So whether they resort back to terrorism, because I'm sure even the Jaish and the Lashkar are really smarting, they would also want to hit back. Or he goes in for a conventional kind of a thing on the LOC or elsewhere. But I would be cautious anyway. Whichever way he decides to, hit back, that they will definitely do it. The ceasefire, I don't see it holding for very long.
So effectively, what you're saying is that even without his elevation, this was a wounded Pakistan army. But given his elevation, given that he's now the man on the stage, right? He can't be in the shadows anymore. He's Field Marshal Asim Munir. He's going to want to try and do something where he can claim to his people that he's flexed his muscle against India. And therefore, for India, we should brace ourselves either the proxy, either the Jaish Lashkar route, or you're saying he may even try and escalate conventionally at the LOC, at the border, return to artillery fire.
Yeah. I also suspect the thing we should also guard against is Bangladesh. To use Bangladesh, Pakistan and Bangladesh of late have tried to chummy up with each other. So to use the eastern corridor, use from Bangladesh to try and deflect attention from Pakistan, because India's attention is focused currently on the western border. But we should not neglect what's happening in our east. And these reports of China and Pakistan wanting to build an airfield at Larmuni Ghat, close to the Chicken's Neck. So there are a lot of potential possibilities that I'm sure people in government are watching these carefully. But for me, the bottom line is you cannot trust this man or Pakistan not to do something, and do something sooner rather than later.
To that extent, I suppose this ceasefire, which is a word we've never used, it's a word only the Americans have used and the Pakistanis have used. This is quite literally only then a halt in hostilities. And I think we're in for a kind of prolonged phase of not just tensions, but possible military conflict with Pakistan. My question to you in the end would be, how might the world community respond? Because one of the frustrating things in this sort of last fortnight has been Western hypocrisy, Trump's bizarre proclamations, China being, their hand firmly on the shoulder of the Pakistan army. So as our delegations, start leaving, these cross-party delegations that are traveling to the global capitals, how do you think this elevation is going to play out in the world, and what should be India's messaging on it? And remember, we're talking on a day when a suicide bomber has targeted a school bus in Balochistan today. So, there is all of that whole Balochistan piece as well.
So there again, you see, this Balochistan thing is they're trying to push the blame onto India, which is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. Delegations is an excellent thing. because the Western media is so hostile
Mhm.
and will continue to be hostile. You just have to take that for granted. Therefore, I think one-on-one briefings, whether it's in Delhi or in various capitals, is probably a good way forward. So at least the decision makers, even the editorial boards,
Yeah.
sometimes ground reporting is very different from the what the
Yeah.
editorial board feels. Sometimes the editorial board doesn't even know the actual situation. So I think we'll have to focus a lot of time and attention on individual first person to person briefings rather than just a statement coming out. This will have to be pushed across the narrative. Pick on 5 or 6 important countries, especially some members of the Security Council, some members who are in the represented in the FATF or in the Human Rights Council in Geneva. So focus on that and then selectively brief them with facts and figures, because that is
Yeah.
going to be important, I think, in a situation where the global order is also in flux and the media is hostile to you.
Absolutely. I do want to ask you one question, though. Shehbaz Sharif is Prime Minister of Pakistan. Again, it's a purely symbolic sort of position. But his elder brother, Nawaz Sharif, who was pushed into exile, then comes back, makes a deal of some kind with the military. He used to keep saying that, I didn't know about Kargil. Now, whether we believe him or not, Prime Minister Modi did try some sort of outreach with him, with Nawaz Sharif, twice, called him to the swearing in, went to meet him in Lahore. And then, of course, we've seen the series of terror attacks and all of that changed. Do you believe Shehbaz Sharif is different from Nawaz Sharif, or do you believe that it literally doesn't matter who is the Prime Minister of Pakistan? And now that Asim Munir is Field Marshal, it matters even less?
That's true. Irrespective of the politician in power, it is the army that calls the shots, especially as far as India is concerned. It's always been the case. Now, the difference with Nawaz Sharif was that he was a genuinely popular leader. At least in Punjab, he was a genuinely popular. Shehbaz Sharif is nowhere near that kind of popularity. Nobody else has.
Yeah.
It was Nawaz Sharif was the last really popular leader, especially in Punjab. I wouldn't say pan Pakistan, but certainly in Punjab. The PTI, Imran Khan, has eaten into the popularity of the PMLN. I don't think that anybody today in PMLN can call for even a meeting in Lahore and expect more than 10 or 15,000 people to turn up. Whereas Imran Khan, you can make sure lakhs will come. So that has weakened the current lot of politicians. I think even if Nawaz Sharif were to come and hold a big rally, he will not be as successful as Imran Khan is. And he seems to have retreated. Imran Khan, Nawaz Sharif, possibly he's trying to ensure the succession of his daughter after Shehbaz. So he doesn't want to ruffle the fingers of the army by trying to be, saying something that will upset them. So he's just biding his time and making sure that Mariam succeeds Shehbaz as and when as there is a succession.
Yeah. So before we let you go, I think what you're saying is Asim Munir's elevation is a signal to India, which already existed. It's not some new signal, but it's a clearer signal that Pakistan is going to try either a terror attack or a military escalation.
Yes, I think so. I think because he has to prove himself. You general the, so you lost. Now that you're Field Marshal, up, kuch karke to dikhao. Show that you are Mother Mumin, whatever it is. So I think we should be very watchful. It doesn't happen, well and good, great. But don't let your guard down, at all. We have lots of, what's happening in China, what's happening with Bangladesh. We should not let our guard down with Pakistan. You can't take your eyes off the ball.
Absolutely. We leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Deveshar. We always learn so much from you. Tilak Deveshar's books on Pakistan, Balochistan are a must read for the times. Do look them up. We'll put the links also in the description below so you can order them directly. Thank you so much, sir, and great talking to you.
Thank you so much, Balko. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Take care.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.